So our whole theme this month in celebration of Christmas has been light. And I've shared it with you as an acronym. I know many of you, most of you, if you've been with us, remember it. The acronym being living in God's highest truth. What a great way to look at light, don't you think? Living in God's highest truth. And this morning I want to talk about the inside light of Christmas. I want to go into some of the mysticism around our much loved symbols of the Christmas story. But I want to begin with a little story of a Jewish boy who was out with his father, and it was the Christmas holidays, and so the little boy saw all of these beautiful lighted Christmas trees, and he was a little envious of them. And he turned to his father and he said, "Could we get a Hanukkah bush?" And his dad said, "No, we can't get a Hanukkah bush." And the little boy said, "Well, why not? I really would like to have a Hanukkah bush." Father said, "No, absolutely no Hanukkah bush. The last time we had a lighted bush, we wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. Now, those of you who are laughing, remember your Old Testament Bible history of the burning bush that was a symbol for Moses in leading the Israelites through the wilderness. Light, living inside God's highest truth. Boy, in some places and times in our lives, it's really easy to do that, right? When things are just humming along, smooth and easy, doors are opening, we are feeling healthy and strong, our relationships are good, finances are flowing well. It's really easy then, is it not, to live inside God's highest truth? But of course we know that the real test is how well we can do that when things aren't quite like that. When things are maybe a little too stressful, or our finances are pulled thin, or our health isn't what we want it to be, or something's gone sideways in our relationships, there is the practice point, the deep practice point of faith, to live in God's highest truth in those times. Now, I know that Christmas can be a very complex and complicated time for us, just as much as it can be a joyous time. And I imagine that there are some of us in this room that might still have a bit left to do and feel kind of spent and tired, might feel like our days are a little crazy and chaotic. In fact, I had to do a bit of a personal inventory and reality check with myself just the other day as I was looking at everything I was still trying to get done. And some of you know that I write a daily message, and it is written individually and personally by me every single morning, sometime between 4:30 in the morning. And every once in a while, if I sleep in, it is a little bit later than 4:30 in the morning. But I think it was either yesterday morning or Friday morning, as I was writing my daily just for today thought, this is what I wrote. Today I put myself on a to-do diet. I will not say yes to more than I can reasonably and joyfully and graciously handle. And I was so grateful for the thought of a to-do diet. Now, I can't say that I did a perfect job staying on it, but the idea of realizing that we are about so much more, are we not, than getting everything done. And so Christmas and the symbols of Christmas, the beautiful symbols of Christmas, what do they mean? What do the shepherds mean? What do the wise men mean? What does the fact that there was no room in the inn and that Jesus was born in a manger, in a stable, what does that mean to us here in San Diego in 2016? Does it have any relevance to us? I think it does. And I think it does when we understand that these are archetypical images that point to a deeper truth. You see, in unity, we have always looked at Jesus as our teacher and our way shower. We have always looked at him as somebody who pointed the way to a different way of living and being in the world, to such an extent that by being in the world and living in the world differently as he taught, not only would our lives be better for ourselves, but we would help to create a more beautiful and loving and peace-filled world for all. And so when we approach then Christmas, how do we approach it as mystics? How do we approach it as metaphysicians? I think we do by looking at the various symbols and asking deeper questions of ourselves. What might this point the way to in me? And so I want us to look at a few of those symbols this morning, some of our much-loved symbols, and to peel back the map that they reveal for us. Now, the first has to do with where Jesus was born. And we know that he was born, or we are told that he was born in a stable in a manger because there was, you can say that with a little more joy because I know you know that part of the story, because there was no room in the inn, right? It was too crowded. Well, why was it too crowded? It was too crowded because there was a census being taken, and Mary and Joseph had gone to Bethlehem to be counted because they were of the lineage of David, and they needed to be there to be counted. And they got there, and there was no room for them in the inn, so all that was left for them was a manger, was a stable. Well, what does that mean to us mystically and metaphysically? It refers to the idea of consciousness. We can look at the inn and the manger, for that matter, as a state of awareness, a state of consciousness. And we must ask ourselves, are we more like the inn or are we more like the manger? For you see, it was the manger that was the place that Jesus was born, right? It was this simple place where this teacher and way shower, who still influences countless people today, was born. Not in the inn, because the inn was too crowded. Well, what is it inside of us that wants to be born but cannot be born if in consciousness it's too crowded? For example, could we not agree that part of living in God's highest truth would be that we long to embody deeper and greater unconditional love in our lives? Would that not be something that we would want to embody? Absolutely. And so what is it that might go on in consciousness that would make it difficult or would crowd out our capacity to love more fully? It could, Say it again? Thoughts could do it. Judgments could do it. Woundedness from the past that we've not healed can keep us in a place where the love that we want to express gets crowded out. How about peace? Any of you more interested in living a more peace-filled life that is not dependent upon outer circumstances, but is a state of being that you can be in no matter what is happening around you? Absolutely. Well, what is it in us that crowds out the experience of peace? Certainly worrisome thoughts do, right? Stress can crowd out the experience of peace. How about forgiveness and compassion? Are these aspects of living in God's highest truth that we want to give birth to in our lives? And not just give birth to as a baby and then walk away, but actually give birth to and see grow in us to maturity. Well, if we are holding resentment and bitterness within us, we're going to crowd out any potential capacity to be more loving, to be more compassionate. And so the point being that whatever kinds of God qualities we want to birth in our lives, they are going to be birthed more out of a place of simplicity and openness than in a consciousness that is bombarded with too much other stuff. Does that make sense? All right. So a different way of looking, is it not, at the manger and at the inn as it relates to consciousness. Second part of symbol in the Christmas story that I think is such a beautiful symbol is the shepherds tending their flock. Can you get an image of that? You know, I idealize that I have these beautiful, clean, sweet-smelling baby lambs and these perfect little sheep, and I somehow think it might not have been like that, you know? But what I do know is the metaphor of the shepherds tending their flock is a really strong one. It's a really powerful symbol. You see, those shepherds, those sheep, those lambs, were everything to those shepherds. That was their livelihood. It wasn't just a hobby. In many ways, the way that they would have tended their flock might be the way that somebody watches over their personal finances, because that's what that flock represented to those shepherds, their livelihood. And they tended their flock with great care and great focus and great discipline. What might that flock represent in us? I think it represents our thoughts. I think it represents the self-talk that goes on within us. And how important it is, if we want to give birth to something precious and beautiful, if we want to give birth to the divine in us, then we must tend our flock as well. We must be vigilant with the quality of the thoughts that we think. Not judgmental when we catch ourselves thinking the kinds of thoughts we really don't want to have replicated in form in our lives. Not beating ourselves up for it, but noticing it and saying, no, I'm going to pull my attention away from that kind of thinking and place my attention over here in this kind of thinking. We have a tool that we use in New Thought, in Unity, called affirmations and denials, to help us do that, to help us retrain our minds. This is one of the reasons that we practice meditation. It's not just to move into that beautiful state we were in this morning, and we seem to go very deep into our practice together today. And that is rich and that is wonderful, but it is meant to cultivate in us the capacity to do that in the midst of whatever is happening in our lives. If we can only reach that place of focused thought and focused practice when we were sitting together in a beautiful place called the Unity Center, practicing together, if we can only do it there, it's not a whole heck of a lot of practical good, is it? We do it to help train ourselves to be able to exercise a kind of mastery over our thinking wherever and whenever our thinking goes awry. I was counseling with somebody this past week who is in the midst of making some significant life changes. And whenever one is contemplating significant life change, there's often 2 steps forward and 1 step back, kind of in the direction. And there's a part of us humanly that wants to have all those steps laid out, and once we make the decision to go there, we want all the doors to open, no detours, and we want all the guarantees and assurances it's going to be smooth sailing along the way. Am I not right? Yeah. But it doesn't usually work that way. And a lot of times we're not vigilant over our thinking in the process. And the illustration I used with this person was, you're asking for clarity, and you need clarity, and you keep using the word clarity with me in our time together. However, here's an image of what it looks like is happening. As you are letting your thinking run rampant in so many unhealthy and unproductive ways, it's as if you have a tall, clear cylinder, glass cylinder, that is filled with mud or dirt and water. And every time you are not vigilant over your thoughts and you're letting your thinking go all over the place, you are stirring that dirt up and creating so much cloudy water from the bottom of the jar to the very top. And you won't be able to see, you won't be able to hear, you won't be able to recognize what your next steps are until you are able to quiet that mind, to be like the shepherds tending watch over their flock, to let all that gunk settle. It may still be there, but it doesn't have to cloud your vision when you can let it settle and you can tend to the control of the kinds of thoughts you want to be holding. This idea of tending our flock is a foundational concept to us in metaphysics. It's one of the ways, in a way, that we reveal ourselves to others by the way we choose to be vigilant over the quality of our thinking. And vigilance over the quality of our thinking, one of the outpicturing of that, is a kind of attitude we walk around life with. People who have learned how to tend the flock of their thoughts tend to also be able to be people who are, by practice, positive. Their attitude is a good, clear, optimistic sort of attitude. I'm reminded of a personal story that happened to my grandmother many years ago. My grandmother, Erna, was once asked by a neighbor of hers, "Are you unity?" And my grandmother said, "No, I don't know what unity is." And the neighbor said to my grandmother, "Well, you really seem like you must be unity. Unity is a spiritual teaching." And my grandmother said, "Well, why do you think I'm unity?" And the person said, "Because you always have this upbeat attitude no matter what's going on in your life, and you always talk about, well, you can choose to think about it differently. And that's what they teach in unity." My grandmother became very curious. And she accepted her friend's invitation to go visit a Unity Church, the Unity Church here in San Diego and Altadena. And she was so taken by that experience, my grandmother was, that she invited me to come. And that was my first introduction to unity, all because my grandmother had a certain degree of control of her thoughts, of tending her mental flock, that's what I'm really talking about, that a neighbor noticed and said, "I think you're unity. I think you're unity." So tending your flock, letting the craziness of the negative thoughts and self-talk quiet down so that the muddy waters settle and you've got some clarity. We're not going to birth the divine in us unless we can practice this kind of diligence over what we let get our attention. The third is the wise men. I'm smiling because my husband, and many of you in this room know John. So I talk about the three wise men. John calls them the three wise guys. He's a little irreverent, and he tells me that's because he grew up with so much Catholicism that when for him it was time to turn his back on that, he decided to become a little irreverent with the whole thing. So whether you call him the three wise men or the three wise guys, they were wise. And the point being that we have these wise men that are so much a part of the symbology and the imagery of the Christmas story. What do they mean to us? And what do they have to do with us birthing the divine? Well, the wise men absolutely represent in us our own innate wisdom. But in order to touch that innate wisdom, we have to be willing to make the time. We have to be willing to realize that sometimes, just like with the shepherds and the wise men, they both share this in common, they had to stop doing what they were doing to go pursue something better and more important. The shepherds, though they were tending their flock, they knew about this happening in Bethlehem. They had to be willing to stop that and shift gears. The wise men, we don't know what they were doing, but we do know that they heard about this bright star in the east and that they were willing to stop what they were doing in pursuit of that. Hold that for a moment and make that yours for a moment. What seems to the star is a rich symbol, and we in metaphysics would say that the star represents our divine guidance or divine idea that we have, something that we are meant to be doing now, something important. That's the star. In order to do that, what wisdom do you have to personally call forth within? In order to do that, what might you have to set aside, temporarily or permanently, in order to journey toward and in support of that star? Those are the kinds of questions that we who are metaphysicians, that we who call ourselves mystics, these are the kinds of questions we live in. This is the kind of journey that we are willing to take. To us, this is in part what Christmas is about. Yes, we can enjoy all the beautiful outer trappings. There's no reason we can't do both. But if we only do the one, if we're only enjoying the beautiful outer trappings but are forgetting the very real, very deep, and very personal instruction within the Christmas story, I think we're missing the whole thing. We in Unity look at Jesus as the great teacher and way shower. Unity minister Eric Butterworth said it better than anybody I know when he said that Jesus was not the great exception, Jesus was the great example. And an example for us today. An example for us today. Whether you believe any part of the Christmas story literally or not, what you cannot deny is that something happened in and through that man that we call Jesus that so transformed his awareness, that so woke him up, that he was changed, fundamentally changed. And not only did something happen in him that woke him up, that fundamentally changed him, but he talked about it. He talked about it to the people he hung out with, all different kinds of people that he hung out with. And they must have caught something, because remember, he was a teacher and had a flock and a following that were pulled into the mystery and the magic of whatever it is that happened to him before the stories around Easter ever happened. So something very real happened in and to him. And I want to suggest that everything he came to do was about helping to point that way to others so that they too could step into a similar level of awakenedness and a similar kind of relationship with the divine. That's what Christmas is. That's what Christmas is. It's not about putting a man up on a pedestal, making him a God and the one and only way to God, and therefore letting ourselves off the hook for the real personal work that is ours to do. That's not what Christmas is about. It is about how do we live a changed life, following in some of the practices and teachings that this man that millions still talk about today, some in error, still talk about today, tried to point us to. So as you prepare this week to celebrate the outer aspect of Christmas, and I hope if you're in town, you're going to join us on Christmas Eve. It's a beautiful, beautiful candlelighting service that we do. But as you enjoy the carols that sing about the wise men or the shepherds or the manger, as you look at your Christmas creche, or as you enjoy your tree or Hanukkah bush, as you see all that, I hope you'll pause. You'll say, what is it that's wanting to be born in me? And what are the steps that are mine to take to help cultivate that? For if you do, then Christmas will not just be another Christmas, it will be something new for you. Namaste and God bless.